Hey guys, Drifter here. In less than a year, TikTok might be banned in the United States, meaning that the app will not be accessible on your phone, it'll go inactive, and you won't even be able to re-download it from the Apple App Store or Google Play. There's even the possibility that the browser/PC page will be restricted to anybody inside the United States. Just a few days ago, Joe Biden signed the TikTok ban bill into law. This ban was rolled into a bill that had support for Ukraine and Israel, and I think FISA as well, though that may have been a separate thing. It had broad bipartisan support with only a few detractors on either side of the aisle, and the law basically requires that TikTok be sold to an American entity in order to keep existing and operating within our borders. So technically, it's a divestiture law and not an outright ban. However, ByteDance, which is the parent company of TikTok, has made it very clear that it does not intend to sell the app. So like in our previous video about adult websites, it is a de facto ban because compliance would be so against the business that they would rather just have it banned. So yeah, I'm back with another video about technology intersecting with politics in the same way that bumper cars are slamming into each other at the local carnival. I kind of wanted to move on to other topics, but they're so related, so similar, and honestly, this one is so much more important. It felt wrong not to come back. This time, it's a much bigger issue. Completely outright shutting down an app and business in the United States is a much bigger issue than restricting access to adult websites. And it's personal for me because I've been talking about how dangerous TikTok is and how dangerous short-form content is for people's minds for the last several years now, while at the same time also posting content on TikTok for the last 6 months. And frustratingly, I was actually getting to a point where I was going to say that I was successful on the platform. I was making things work there, carving out a nice non-gaming niche for myself of these little fun science and tech infotainment videos. And now that that's likely to go away, this whole prospect is suddenly a mix of sweet and sour for me. So for the rest of the video, what I'm going to do is my best attempt at breaking down the details of the new law. I'm going to lay out TikTok's best options for avoiding the ban, or how to fight this. I'm going to talk about why it was implemented in the first place. That's going to be the politics part. Politics is just a part of the TikTok ban, hard to avoid that. And then at the very end, I'm going to offer some of my own personal opinions. And you may notice that I'm back in the bed again and we got Call of Duty gameplay. That's because this topic is so hot and so fresh. I did not have time to plan a full production for my little home studio. I'm just jumping right on, offering you the best information I have, telling you how I really feel, and I did PT today, so I've already done a lot of physical activity, but I'm doing okay, don't worry about me. The Call of Duty gameplay is just a little bit of visual flair, a little bit of something interesting to watch while I talk, and of course, as we'll mention later, Bobby Kotick, former CEO of Activision, wants to buy TikTok, so it seems tangentially relevant. So without further ado, let's talk about the details of the new law itself. The bill empowers the U.S. Attorney General to place restrictions on any app that is controlled by a foreign adversary. The language of the bill appears to give the executive branch all the decision-making powers, and it also seems to be generic enough to apply to any app or technology that is owned by an adversary or could be foreign-owned in any capacity. But in this case, that app is going to be TikTok and the adversary is going to be China. And in order to make it very clear what the purpose of this bill was, it does explicitly list TikTok and ByteDance as examples of companies that would be regulated under this law while not mentioning any others. So it's a law that specifically targets TikTok and empowers the government to target other companies as well. Exceptions are made if a company divests ownership of the technology, and in this case, divest means sell to Americans, American allies, or at least American-based corporations. Think Meta, Google, something like that. So in theory, an American company could buy TikTok, change nothing, and it stays available online for everybody. Right now, there are lots of greedy billionaires lining up to get their share. Even Bobby Kotick, CEO of Activision, is there, waiting in line, hoping to be able to buy up a little bit of TikTok so that he can get some of his influence spread around the way Elon did with Twitter. So like most laws, this isn't an outright ban. They didn't pass a law that just immediately shuts down TikTok, but they did define a set of parameters and enforcement actions that would result in a de facto ban if TikTok did not comply, and they knew that TikTok is ByteDance is very unlikely to comply. So it's a de facto ban. I do want to point out that this process doesn't happen immediately. Of course, you can still watch TikTok. Many of you probably watched it today. TikTok has been given 9 months to comply before any enforcement actions begin. And enforcement actions are also things that'll take some time. So my guess would be it'll be over a year before TikTok fully goes away. That would be my guess on the situation. Technically, it could disappear at 9 months, though. And this is America, after all. So there will be legal challenges. There'll be Supreme Court cases about it. They'll fight it all the way up to the top, which leads perfectly into the next section. So, what can TikTok do to avoid being banned in the United States? Well, first up, they could technically just comply and sell the company to a variety of American investors, and TikTok would continue to function as normal. The app itself also has the ability to project massive influence, and I believe that they could, if they wanted to, run a really powerful lobbying campaign and try to galvanize users against the government. But its most likely path of action is going to be a series of constitutional challenges to this new law. The CEO of ByteDance has made it very clear that he plans to fight this and bring a case to the Supreme Court on First Amendment grounds. As we talked about in the previous video, part of the First Amendment is your right to access information, and banning this app might limit Americans' rights to share, create, and view certain content, which would restrict their freedom of speech. This little bit is just my opinion. I think that logic is kind of a stretch because our right to self-expression typically doesn't extend to corporations or specific venues being required to host our opinions or engage with us. Corporations are typically allowed to enforce as they see fit, and I can see that argument being used here. On top of this, TikTok has already had 2 legal victories on cases exactly like this. For example, in Montana, a federal judge blocked the state's ban on TikTok, ruling that it likely violated the First Amendment. Also, the Trump administration attempted to ban ByteDance several years ago and force it to divest the app, but was shot down by federal courts on First Amendment grounds. So that is 2 federal court losses already, and that's good precedence for TikTok to cite. There are some interesting legal questions on interstate commerce and the scale of businesses being affected. TikTok has said that banning the app would disrupt the lives of 170 million Americans, and more importantly, 7 million US businesses. I'm not sure where these numbers come from, but they do believe the economic impact could also violate people's rights. There are some more unusual claims that selling the company would also include selling all of their data, which might violate people's rights in certain ways. And this one, again, is pretty sketchy as the app is kind of notorious for harvesting data, and we do already allow for data brokering markets. I think that TikTok could and likely will ask for an injunction to stop enforcement of this new law until any or all of those claims have been settled in court, which in this case will probably mean when the Supreme Court decides. I doubt the Supreme Court is going to agree with all of the claims that TikTok will make. However, it is my opinion that an injunction is reasonable here given the scale of impact, the precedent set, and economic concerns. If they were granted a temporary injunction until the decisions were made, that would make sense to me. Moving along, let's talk about why TikTok got banned in the first place. This is the part of the video where we talk about politics, and I'll offer some of my own opinions. We'll try to keep those two very clear and separate from each other. And I'm going to start off by offering the on-paper reported reasons from government officials as to why they wanted to ban the app. Firstly, TikTok is probably the most influential social media platform in the Western world right now, and it is entirely controlled by a foreign adversary, i.e. China. Its parent company, ByteDance, is headquartered in China and run through the Cayman Islands. They have a Singaporean CEO and have taken steps to distance themselves from being associated with the CCP, but the reality of the situation is that, like most businesses in China, it is partially owned and directly controlled by the government. In America, our corporations and government are quite separate. They don't always overlap with each other. They do in some cases. But large businesses in China over a certain value are almost certainly going to have direct inputs from the government on how they're being run. That separation is very minimal in the nation of China. So at the end of the day, even though ByteDance might say that they're not, they are definitely beholden to the CCP. And the app is probably the most influential recommendation algorithm on the planet right now. and it's in the hands of an authoritarian regime that is committing atrocities on a daily basis. And there is no way that can be good on the long run, in the long run. That would be like if a reptilian alien owned Facebook, but I guess the separation there isn't too different. This makes the app itself a major national security issue because it allows a foreign adversary to directly control our national narrative. They have the ability to sort of put their finger on the algorithm and push different trends certain ways as it benefits them. Secondly, TikTok is notorious for harvesting personally identifying data, most of this from young people. Now, we do know that all apps and websites and tracking cookies and little programs and stuff you put on your phone all harvest data, retain it, and sell it for marketing purposes. However, TikTok harvests much more data than any company that I can think of offhand, just a really outrageous amount of personal information about people. The data is primarily for young people, Gen Z, some millennials, 25 and under, and tons of children, just straight up information about our children. All of this data somehow ends up back in China, despite promises and public-facing attempts to do the opposite. ByteDance will tell you they're investing in data security, that they don't retain data, that they're not sharing it with China, that they never did this, that they never will do this, and their promises are no more full than any of the American companies that lie about the exact same thing. That's a little bit of an opinion on mine, but I've seen article after article about how they keep finding American data from TikTok in China. So this means that the government of China has a massive treasure trove of information about honestly most Americans. And I think that these are by far the two best reasons to ban the app. I gotta be serious with you, this is a major national security concern, and these are the topics that people will talk most about on TV, but I actually don't believe that that is the motivation, or at least the straw that broke the camel's back, to kick off the ban process. This second part of the why video is a little bit more of my opinion. You can find news articles backing some of this stuff up, but it's a less official reason. The third reason for this, and just my opinion, is that TikTok has been a haven for US counterculture, and both political parties seem to want to lock that down for different reasons. Republicans didn't really care about TikTok until teenagers trolled a Trump rally, making him think he was going to have like 50,000 people attending when it was 5,000. And after LGBT content became extremely popular on the app amongst teenagers. So, in the current culture wars, trolling Trump and promoting gay ideology, not very popular amongst Republicans. Democrats didn't seem to care about that. They didn't seem to care about the security concerns. They didn't seem to care about the spying or really anything until all of a sudden there were all these criticisms of Joe Biden and pro-Palestine videos and people criticizing Americans' support of Israel. Then suddenly Democrats wake up and care that they're being criticized. So it's my personal opinion that both parties have counter narratives going on in the United States right now that they would like to shut down. There are other good reasons that are easy to pitch to more reasonable people, like national security concerns, but neither party seemed to really care until they were getting criticized or trolled through the app. So in the last bit of the video, I want to talk about some of my own personal opinions. And this section is especially painful for me because, as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm actually kind of getting good at TikTok. I'll knock on wood, try not to jinx it, whatever. And it's kind of weird because I've made videos on the topic to this, but I believe that the app is literally mind poison, and I refuse to use it myself in any capacity. I also refuse Instagram, YouTube Shorts. I have Reddit so locked down, it's just like in text mode, there's no scrolling, no nothing. However, perhaps hypocritically, I still post several videos there per day for other people to enjoy. It's primarily content that is counter-programming to the nature of the app itself. They are long-form content videos, usually 2, 3, sometimes 4 minutes long, which is like insanely long form on TikTok. 99% of them are fun topics on science, tech, infotainment. I'll put in a few little personal or political ones sprinkled in if they're funny enough. And I've kind of been doing this for 6 months without a lot of shout outs here on the channel, just past 50,000 followers, which made me feel a lot more confident about my work there. And I felt like I was doing some good on the platform. I was basically just doing some little science educational stuff, covering some new topics on technology, having a lot of fun, making a little bit of revenue, growing something totally organic, and now it's going to get banned. So that gives me very mixed feelings. I did an entire video 8 months ago about how extremely bad short form content is for your brain and how very few people can handle that without deleterious effects. In short, to summarize that video, it creates dopamine loops that are difficult to escape from. It totally annihilates your attention span, even more so for kids that grow up on it. And it tends to increase polarization amongst different groups of people. This type of media is inherently different from TV and video games in how sophisticated the algorithms are at manipulating your emotional feedback loops and eroding critical thinking processes. And if you're thinking that sounds like a boomer complaint that like rock and roll music and comic books rot your brain, no. I mean, companies like Meta and TikTok hire whole teams of psychologists, psychiatrists, neuropsychiatrists, like people that have it, like neurochemists, sociologists, and all of this, and spend billions studying to refine these algorithms and kind of figure out how people think and run little experiments on people and stuff. It's very wild. It causes widespread harm to society. And lots of other apps push this type of short form content too, but TikTok is truly the king of it. And this puts me in a really bad place. I guess in other videos I might have complained too much. I don't think I ever called for an outright TikTok ban. I always wanted some sort of, we'll get to what I wanted a little bit later on, but I wanted some sort of regulation or guardrails put in place for this kind of content before it causes harm. And I guess now I just get to put my shoe in my mouth because I'm getting what I want. Be careful what you ask for. I don't know what the right phrase here to, I'm self-clowning in some ways. So like the adult website video we just did, I believe that just because something is bad is not usually a good enough reason to restrict it from others. It feels wrong to deprive others of their freedom of choice outside of very dire circumstances. The next topic I want to talk about is that all of the things that the politicians are saying about it being a national security risk are, in my opinion here in this part of the video, absolutely true. The app is literally spying on the youngest and most impressionable of Americans. This gives the CCP the ability to put their finger on the algorithm and push almost any kind of narrative that they want, just whatever happens to be beneficial to them at the time. It doesn't seem that they do that a lot right now, but they certainly have the ability to do it when they want to. Both of these things can be wildly destructive, and they endanger our fragile democracy, which puts me in a weird place because there doesn't seem to be any kind of way that I can ethically argue that TikTok, at least in its current form, is anything other than a detriment to our society. No matter how happy I am with it, no matter how successful I am over there, no matter how happy the little science content makes me or how comfortable I'm getting, I don't think I can ethically justify what the app does. And yet there is one nagging problem, a big old fat whataboutism sandwich with extra cheese on top. And that is that American tech companies all run extremely similar products. They all spy on you. They all harvest an outrageous amount of information, and they sell it to data brokers who then sell it to God knows who. Could be China for all we know, probably is in some capacity. And they are more than happy cooperating with autocratic nations around the world just so long as there's a steady paycheck involved. Meta, Apple, Google, those are the big ones I'm thinking of off the top of my head. X, even with Elon's management. They all do pretty awful, unethical things that are either identical to or extremely similar to what TikTok does. American big tech companies have just as much ability to influence our politics and narratives by being heavy-handed with algorithms. It doesn't seem like they're doing that right now, but again, they certainly have the potential to should they choose to in the future. And the type of content that most American companies are pushing right now is also short-form content that is nearly identical to what TikTok pioneered and is successful with, and that content is equally as destructive to the mental health and development of our children. But these companies are allowed to keep doing this because they're American. You know, it's okay when America rots your kids' brains and spies on you. It's okay when America steals your information and sells it to other people. But no, very bad when China does it. I think that's total nonsense. I think it is the height of hypocrisy. I, in a more perfect world, wish that America would have had a GDPR, kind of like the European Union, which is an all-encompassing legislation that works to help protect your privacy and provides some insights into what algorithms are doing. Instead of our nation working so hard to ban a specific app, we could create national standards for how to protect people's private data. We could manage appropriate access for children. Honestly, we could fund research about the effects of this content on children. We could require some degree of public disclosure, or at least internal agency review of the impact of algorithms, what they're favoring, what they're doing, how they work, dark patterns, pushes, etc. There are tons of extremely important consumer protection laws that we could pass that would literally require TikTok to radically change their business in a way that would solve the claimed problems with the app. But we won't do that because it would also hold categorically evil American corporations like Meta up to the exact same standards as we would for TikTok. And we probably will never do this because American companies make money. American companies are profitable. American companies pay American taxes. American companies, cooperate with our political parties. They cooperate with agencies. And while we're not China where they're fully enmeshed together, there is some cooperative overlap between the two. And as long as that relationship is great, American companies will never be subject to any sort of scrutiny, no matter what they do, which I hate. So I don't have a super great answer for you here on what I think people should do. If I were completely selfish, I would say that no, TikTok is great. Keep doing TikTok. Follow me on TikTok. More subs, more money. If I were completely selfless, I would be like, no, please, government, destroy this thing that I've worked really hard on to sort of resurrect. And I'm really torn on what to do. And I'm really frustrated. And I'm, as I say here in the opinion section, very frustrated that American companies can do the exact same thing with no consequences, but China bad. I hate it. It's very frustrating. I don't have a cool answer for you or a cool send-off here. I just hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.